later that the Askermote were translated into English, and from that moment their authority was doomed. The Chancellor was the first to recover from the quotation. Daily contact with these archaic sanctities had dulled his awe, and the President's impotent irritation spurred him to action. "But you are not a Yahid," he said quietly. "By paragraph 5 of the same section, anyone whose name appears on the charity list ceases to be a Yahid." "And a vastly proper law," said Manasseh with irony. "Everybody may vote but the Schnorrer." And ignoring the Chancellor's point at great length, he remarked confidentially to the Chief of the Elders, at whose elbow he was still encamped, "It is curious how few of your elders perceive that those who take the charity are the pillars of the synagogue. What keeps your community together? Fines. What ensures respect for your constitution? Fines. What makes every man do his duty? Fines. What rules this very Mahamad? Fines. And it is the poor who provide an outlet for all these moneys. Egad, do you think your members would for a moment tolerate your penalties if they did not know the money was laid out in mitzvot? Charity is the salt of riches, says the Talmud, and indeed it is the salt that preserves your community." "Have done, sir, have done!" shouted the President, losing all regard for those grave amenities of the ancient council chamber which Manasseh did his best to maintain. "Do you forget to whom you are talking?" "I am talking to the Chief of the Elders," said Manasseh in a wounded tone. "But if you would like me to address myself to you—" And, wheeling round the Chief of the Elders, he landed his chair next to the President's. "Silence, fellow!" thundered the President, shrinking spasmodically from his confidential contact. "You have no right to a voice at all. As the Chancellor has reminded us, you are not even a Yahid, a congregant." "Then the laws do not apply to me," retorted the beggar quietly. "It is only the Yahid who is privileged to do this, who is prohibited from doing that. No Askama mentions the Schnorrer, or gives you any authority over him." "On the contrary," said the Chancellor, seeing the President disconcerted again, "he is bound to attend the weekday services, but this man hardly ever does, sir." "I never do," corrected Manasseh with touching sadness. "That is another of the privileges I have to forego in order to take your charity. I cannot risk appearing to my Maker in the light of a mercenary." "And what prevents you taking your turn in the graveyard watches?" sneered the Chancellor. The antagonists were now close together, one on either side of the President of the Mahamad, who was wedged between the two bobbling, quarrelling figures, his complexion altering momently for the blacker, and his fingers working nervously. "What prevents me?" replied Manasseh. "My age. It would be a sin against heaven to spend a night in the cemetery. If the body snatchers did come, they might find a corpse to their hand in the watchtower. But I do my duty. I always pay a substitute." "No doubt," said the Treasurer. "I remember your asking me for the money to keep an old man out of the cemetery. Now I see what you meant." "Yes," began two others. "And I—" "Order, gentlemen, order," interrupted the President desperately, for the afternoon was flitting, the sun was setting, and the shadows of twilight were failing. "You must not argue with the man. Hark you, my fine fellow, we refuse to sanction this marriage. It shall not be performed by our ministers, nor can we dream of admitting your son-in-law as a Yahid." Then admit him on your charity list, said Manasseh. We are more likely to strike you off, and by gad, cried the President, tattooing on the table with his whole fist, if you don't stop this scandal instanter, we will send you howling. Is it excommunication you threaten? Said Manasseh, rising to his feet. There was a menacing glitter in his eye. This scandal must be stopped, repeated the President, agitatingly rising in involuntary imitation. Any member of the Mahamad could stop it in a twinkling, said Manasseh sullenly. You yourself, if you only chose. If I only chose? Echoed the President inquiringly. If you only chose my daughter. Are you not a bachelor? I am convinced she could not say nay to anyone present excepting the Chancellor. Only no one is really willing to save the community from this scandal, and so my daughter must marry as best she can. And yet it is a handsome creature who would not disgrace even a house in Hackney. Manasseh spoke so seriously that the President fumed the more. Let her marry this Pole, he ranted, and you shall be cut off from us in life and death. Alive you shall worship without our walls, and dead you shall be buried behind the boards. For the poor man, excommunication, said Manasseh in ominous soliloquy. For the rich man, permission to marry the Tedesco of his choice. Leave the room, fellows, vociferated the President. You have heard our ultimatum. But Manasseh did not quail. And you shall hear mine, he said, with a quietness that was the more impressive for the President's fury. Do not forget, Mr. President, that you and I owe allegiance to the same brotherhood. Do not forget that the power which made you can unmake you at the next election. Do not forget that if I have no vote, I have vast influence, that there is not a Yahid whom I do not visit weekly, that there is not a Schnorrer who would not follow me in my exile. Do not forget that there is another community to turn to, yes, the very Ashkenazic community you condemn, with the treasurer of which I talked but just now, a community that waxes daily in wealth and greatness, while you sleep in your sloth. His tall form dominated the chamber. His head seemed to touch the ceiling. The councillors sat dazed as amid a lightning storm. Jackanapes! Blasphemer! Shameless renegade! Cried the President, choking with wrath. And being already on his legs, he dashed the bell and tugged at it madly, blanching the Chancellor's face with the perception of a lost opportunity. I shall not leave this chamber till I choose, said Manasseh, dropping stolidly into the nearest chair and folding his arms. At once a cry of horror and consternation rose from every throat. Every man leapt threateningly to his feet, and Manasseh realized that he was throned in the alcoved armchair. But he neither blenched nor budged. Nay, keep your seats, gentlemen, he said quietly. The President, turning at the stir, caught sight of the Schnorrer, staggered, and clutched at the mantle. The councillors stood spellbound for an instant, while the Chancellor's eyes roved wildly around the walls, as if expecting the gold names to start from their panels. The beadle rushed in, terrified by the strenuous tintinnabulation, looked instinctively toward the throne for orders, then underwent petrifaction on the threshold and stared speechlessly at Manasseh, what time the President, gasping like a landed cod, vainly strove to utter the order for the beggar's expulsion. Don't stare at me, Gomez, Manasseh cried imperiously. Can't you see the President wants a glass of water?